Hello, this is Mayor Ed again, and I'd like to read you my most recent article, and the title is The Only Way Trump Can Gain Venezuelans' Support. In order to gain widespread popular Venezuelan support and prevent a guerrilla insurrection by Maduro followers, Trump must personally address the Venezuelans on a live televised broadcast with logical, enlightened, persuasive recommendations for a prosperous democratic Venezuela run by an honest, competent government, fully respectful of human rights. Trump should immediately assure Venezuelans that the United States has no intention of appropriating Venezuela's oil and that he realizes Venezuela's nationalization of its oil sector was just as legal as Saudi Arabia's and the nationalizations by the other OPEC nations decades ago. His intention is to have Venezuela's oil resources competently and honestly managed, in contrast to the totally incompetent and corrupt management under Maduro. He would suggest having Chevron, the American company with the most experience and knowledge of Venezuela's oil fields and refineries, be in charge of managing their full recovery. The U.S. government would assume responsibility for overseeing Chevron's honest, fully transparent management in Venezuela's interest. U.S. control over Venezuelan oil production and sales is essential for steering Venezuela towards democracy through eliminating the Maduro regime's income. And it's also essential for ending Cuba's communist dictatorship as it relies on Venezuelan oil imports. Communist Cuba's fall might well be followed by the fall of other U.S. adversaries. Additionally, Trump should suggest that Venezuela's national oil company be privatized with its shares distributed equally to all Venezuelan adults, entitling them to annual dividends subject to a 15% withholding tax for the benefit of the Venezuelan government agencies in charge of infrastructure investments and essential government and social services. The dividends would be determined according to best corporate practices, a good balance between providing income to shareholders while ensuring sustained profitable growth. Parentheses. That is what I recommended for Iraq at the time of the American occupation of Iraq under Paul Bremer in my article of April 25th, 2003, with the title, How to Keep Iraq from Becoming a Second Iran, which Henry Kissinger approved of and passed on to Paul Bremer, his former associate. Paul Bremer subsequently adopted my suggestion in his article published a few months later by the Wall Street Journal. But unfortunately, he never implemented it. That policy of giving Iraqi citizens direct ownership of the nation's oil with the benefit of receiving substantial regular quarterly dividends would have immediately stabilized Iraq and prevented anti-American sentiment from rising. It would have quashed widespread rumors that the U.S. intended to steal Iraqi oil. Kissinger responded to my article by writing me on July 10th, 2003, quote, in spite of my delay in thanking you for sending me a copy of your paper, How to Keep Iraq from Becoming a Second Iran, I wanted you to know that I read it with interest, you make a number of valid points, and I appreciated your bringing the article to my attention, end quote, and close parentheses. No shares distributed to Venezuelan citizens could be sold to foreigners ever, and no citizen could own more than a total of 10 shares. The point is no concentration of ownership of the Venezuelan oil company. It must be owned by the citizens of Venezuela. Trump should publicly state that the winning candidate of Venezuela's most recent presidential election, Maria Corina Machado, will be inaugurated as president, that he will support and advise her on how to prevent Maduro and allies from subverting her government and its efforts to rehabilitate Venezuela as a prosperous democracy, free of corruption and influenced by foreign dictatorships. Shockingly, in spite of Ms. Machado's overwhelming electoral victory over Maduro 2 years ago and her very favorable public opinion polls, showing that the great majority of Venezuelans strongly back her and not Maduro's regime, Trump has dismissed her capacity to lead the nation and has actually backed Maduro's illegitimate vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, to temporarily govern Venezuela so long as she follows his orders. What is the purpose of removing Maduro, but not also his illegitimate dictatorial regime? Apparently, Trump fears instantly eliminating the Maduro regime would lead to a replay of the Sunni insurrection in Iraq following Bremer. But there is no parallel. Ms. Machado is very popular with the great majority of Venezuelans, while the Maduro regime is not. With the firm backing of the United States, Ms. Machado would be able to prevent or quickly defeat any Maduro regime insurrection. Most importantly, Trump should assert that just as the success of a baseball, basketball, or football or soccer club depends on all its players being very well trained, the success of a nation depends on all its citizens being very well educated. That means a truly excellent education must be provided to all Venezuelan youths. That requires public schools run as the best private schools with strict discipline, lots of homework study hall, school uniforms, very competent, highly qualified teachers, individual attention given to students with academic or psychological difficulties, and, of crucial importance, an enlightened high school curriculum providing a solid, broad educational base. That also requires a large proportion of youths going on to university and many obtaining advanced degrees. Trump must emphasize that the free enterprise system is the most effective economic system, especially when accompanied by rational fiscal and monetary policy, and, importantly, that avoiding poverty requires a high level of education. The importance of having an enlightened high school curriculum cannot be overstated. Successful societies require all citizens to be very well and broadly educated, not narrowly educated, with knowledge limited to their profession. An enlightened high school curriculum would include the following 4-year courses. 1. Psychology, accompanied by group therapy and good parenting workshops. 2. Economics and investing, complemented by all students running their own virtual stock and bond portfolios online with annual prizes for the top performers. 3. 20th century history in great detail, explaining the causes of World War I and World War II, the causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, why communism failed, how dictatorships arise, all of that accompanied by class discussion. 4. Logic and critical thinking, with case histories illustrating major failures and successes, accompanied by class discussion. 5. History of art, architecture, and design. 6. History of music. 7. Foreign languages and cultures, that is essential in a globalized, highly competitive economy. 8. Ethics and empathy, with case histories and class discussion. 9. Introductory law, including constitutional law, with case histories and class discussion. 10. Comparative religion, carefully and objectively analyzing the holy books, with class discussion. 11. Selected media reports and documentaries on world politics, history, and culture, with class discussion. 12. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which all member nations undersign and promise to uphold and defend, although many violate their pledge, even brazenly, complemented by the world history of human rights violations, with class discussion. 13. The United Nations Charter, complemented by the world history of charter violations. Trump should also publicly assert that the United States would greatly benefit from requiring its own public schools to provide an outstanding, broad-based education with an enlightened curriculum, explaining that all of our social, economic, political, and foreign policy problems are due to the low average level of education of our general population and of our politicians. Since problems cannot be solved when incorrectly defined, Democrats should stop hypocritically saying that affordability is a problem when the problem is poverty, and Republicans should stop blaming foreigners for our addiction problems when no foreigners are forcing Americans to take fentanyl or cocaine. We should attack the real cause of addiction, mental problems, with psychology courses and group therapy workshops in all our high schools. Thanks for listening. I hope my article was of interest to you and persuasive. See you next time.